Hello, in this video I will show you how to develop a simple 2D game using Android Studio and Java. By the end of this video, you will be able to do this. Let's get started. If you want to master Android apps and games development, then click subscribe and the bell icon, and let's do this together. Open Android Studio. Click on the new project. Click next. Write the project name. Give the package name. I am going to save on my desktop. For language, select Java, and for minimum SDK, select API 21 or Android 5.0 Lollipop. Click Finish. Now wait for Android Studio to build and configure your empty project. First, I will copy my image files in drawable folder. Next, create a font folder inside RES and copy the font file inside that. Go to activity_main.xml. First, I will change this constant layout to linear layout. Delete this text view as we don't need this. Give orientation, background and gravity for the root linear layout. Inside this root linear layout, add 2 image views and 1 button. The code is pretty straightforward. I hope you understand everything. Check the design. Perfect. Click on Start Game, press Alt Enter and click Create Start Game in Main Activity. In Main Activity, inside onCreate, write this code to keep the screen on. In Start Game method, create an instance of GameView class and call setContentView with that object. We will create GameView class later. Next, let's create the spike class responsible for managing the spikes. Define a bitmap array for holding all the spike images. Define an integer variable called spikeFrame and initialize it with 0. Declare spike x, spike y, and spike velocity. Declare a random object reference. Next, define the constructor for this spike class. Initialize the spike array elements. Press Ctrl D to duplicate the line. Instantiate the random object. Call resetPosition method, which will basically reset spike x, spike y, and spike velocity. We will define this method next. You can change the access specifier from private to public. Initialize spike x, spike y, and spike velocity with random values as shown. Define 3 getter methods for getting spike bitmap, spike width, and spike height. All the spike elements have the same width and height, so we can take any elements width and height. Next, we will create the explosion class responsible for managing explosion. Define the bitmap array for holding the explosion images. Define an integer variable called explosion frame and initialize it with 0. Declare explosion x and explosion y. Next, define the constructor of this class. In the constructor, initialize all the explosion array elements. Press Ctrl D to duplicate the line. Define a getter method to get the explosion bitmap for a particular explosion frame. Next, start creating the GameView class. This class will extend View class. Click on the red squiggly line, press Alt Enter and click Create Constructor Matching Super. In the class scope, declare bitmap object references for background, ground and rabbit. Declare two rect object references for background and ground. Declare a context object reference. Declare a handler object reference. Make sure to import android.os.handler package. Declare a long integer and initialize it with 30. Declare a runnable object reference. Define two paint objects for showing points and health. Define a float variable for text size and initialize it with 120. Define an integer variable for storing points and initialize it with 0. Define an integer variable for life and initialize it with 3. Declare two static integer variables for storing device width and device height. Declare a random object reference. Declare two float variables for storing rabbitx and rabbity. Declare two float variables for repositioning the rabbit during a touch. Declare array list of spike and explosion. Next, in the constructor, store the past context in this class's context. Instantiate the background, ground and rabbit bitmaps. Instantiate a display object. Instantiate a point object. Call getSize method on display object and pass the point object. Now size.x and size.y will return the device width and device height respectively. Instantiate the rect background and rect ground objects. Instantiate the handler object. This handler class schedules a runnable to be executed after some delay. Instantiate the runnable object. And in the run method, call invalidate method, which will basically call the onDraw method for us, and the view will be redrawn. Call various methods on TextPaint to set the color, text size, text alignment, and typeface. Set the color for health paint to green. Instantiate the random object. Initialize rabbit x and rabbit y in a way that the rabbit can be drawn at horizontally center and on top of the ground. Instantiate spikes and explosions array lists. Using a for loop, create 3 spike objects and add 2 spikes array list. Next, override the onDraw method. Call draw bitmap on canvas object and draw the background, ground, and rabbit bitmaps. Iterate a for loop 3 times, that is from 0 to spikes.size -1. Inside the for loop, draw the spike element with the current spike frame. Increment spike frame for the current element. If spike frame becomes greater than 2, initialize it with 0 for a smooth spinning animation. Increment spike y with spike velocity for a top-down movement. Check if bottom edge of the spike touches the top edge of the ground. If true, increment points by 10. Create an explosion object. Set its x and y coordinate with the spike's x and y coordinate. Add this explosion object to the explosions array list and call reset position on current spike element from the spikes array list. Iterate a for loop from 0 to spike size -1. Check if spike's right edge touches the rabbit's left edge. And spike's left edge touches the rabbit's right edge. And spike's bottom edge touches the top edge of the rabbit. And spike's bottom edge is less than the bottom of the rabbit. Once all the conditions are satisfied, we can say a collision happened. So decrement life, call reset position on current spike element. When life becomes 0, create an intent object, put points into the intent object, launch game over activity and finish the current activity. Iterate a for loop from 0 to explosions.size -1. Draw the explosion bitmaps. Increment explosion frame for every element of explosions array list. Once explosion frame for an element becomes greater than 3, remove the explosion object from array list, since we are done showing the explosion animation. Check the life. By default, the health bar is shown in green. If life becomes 2, then we will change it to yellow. When it is 1, then we will change it to red. Draw the health bar. Next, draw the points. The parameters are text, x, y and paint. Finally, call postDelete method on handler object, which will call the run method in runnable after 30 milliseconds. In run method, we called invalidate method, which will call the onDraw method for us, and the view will be redrawn. It will again call the run method in runnable after 30 milliseconds, which will again call invalidate, and this way we created an infinite game loop. Override onTouchEvent method. Return true. Define two float variables for storing xy coordinates of touch point. We will consider only when touch is on or below the rabbit, so check for the condition. Determine what kind of action is being performed by calling getAction method on motion event object and store in an integer variable. When you touch the screen, the action underscore down event fires up. In this case, store x coordinate of touch in old x and store rabbit x in old rabbit x. Check if the event is action underscore move. Now this event would be rapidly fired as long as the player is moving his or her finger. Here we move the rabbit as the same amount as the difference between the old touch and the new touch. But we won't let the rabbit go off the screen. Next, we will design the layout for game over. For file name, write game underscore over. For root element, select linear layout. Click OK. Change the background attribute of this root linear layout. Add a inner linear layout for holding image buttons for restart and exit feature. Add a view to push the image buttons on left and right side of the screen. Add another inner linear layout for showing a cup image, points and personal best. We will only show this cup image when the player exceeds his or her highest score. We will use a table layout for showing the points and personal best score. Inside this first table row, we will use two text views for showing the label, your points and the point itself. Inside the second table row, we will use two text views for showing the label highest and the highest score itself. Add a view to push the table layout to the top by 80 dp so that it can be displayed nearly the center of the screen. Check the design. Perfect. Next, start developing the game over activity. This class should extend app_compat activity. Override the onCreate method. Delete this second parameter also from the super call as we don't need that. In the class scope, declare few object references of text view, shared preferences and image view. call setContentView and pass the layout resource file for game over. In onCreate, get the handles by calling findViewById method. Get the points from intent. Set TP points with the value content in points. Next, instantiate the shared preferences object. Here, my_pref is the file name and 0 for private mode. Create a shared preferences key called highest with default value of 0. Also, store this key value in another integer variable also named highest. Check if points is greater than highest. If true, display the cup image since the player has scored a new highest. Store points in highest. Create a shared preferences.editor object. Put the value of the variable highest in the key highest. Call commit method on editor object to save the changes. This way we can always keep the player's highest score. Set TV highest with integer variable highest. Next, define the restart method that takes a view parameter. Here, create an intent object. Launch main activity with the intent object. And finish game over activity. Define exit method, which will basically close the app. Go to values themes.xml and add this style tag to make your app full screen. Refer this theme in Android manifest. Next, add an activity tag for game over. I will copy this activity tag and paste below, and I will change the name to game over. I will also change the screen orientation to portrait. Copy this line and paste here. Also, we don't need intent filter tag for game over. Let's start the emulator. I'm using Nexus 5X. Click on the green Run button. Click the Start button to start the game. As you can see, rolling spikes from the sky are dropping on the ground, and you have to dodge the spikes by moving your finger left or right. For each spike you dodge, you get 10 points. Your score is displayed on left and health bar on right. Initially, health bar is green, but as soon as you hit a spike, it changes to yellow, and after another hit, it changes to red. Once all your lives are finished, game over activity is launched where your score and personal best is being shown. If you exit your highest score, you will see a cup or trophy image. From this screen, you can restart the game or exit from it. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Thanks for watching and see you in another tutorial series. If you find this tutorial useful, please like and share the video and subscribe to my channel for more tutorials like this.